The European Political Community Summit was held in Armenia this Monday, a biannual political forum. The EPC was established on the initiative of the French President Emmanuel Macron in 2022 in specific response to the invasion of Ukraine. And this session was seen as an opener for an EU-Armenia summit scheduled for Tuesday, focused on ways to try to counter Russia's insidious influence on Armenian politics. Douglas Herbert has joined us here in the studio. Douglas, of course, is our international affairs commentator. Doug, this is a truly multinational event. Macron says, and I'll quote him, Armenia has chosen the path towards Europe. That's what he says, the French president. Of course, setting up the EPC in 2022. Canada's now joined. How significant is that?
Yeah, significant, right? Because, look, I think you know your geography well enough if I tell you Canada's not in Europe, right? It's on the other side of the ocean. So what's he doing there in what's called the European political, community here? The reason is Mark Carney has managed to do something, Mark, that a lot of European leaders have struggled to do, and that is to really push back at Donald Trump and to do so in a credible and visible way. And he's put themselves really out there, literally in the line of fire, in the sense that Canada is America's immediate northern neighbor. So he, stands to suffer the consequences of Trump's retribution and wrath a lot more quickly. And what he's warned about recently, he's basically said he's called on what he calls middle powers. Presumably that's all the powers meeting at this meeting in Yerevan. Middle powers have to sort of get together. They have to sort of join their forces. It sounds a little bit like the Avengers or something, in order to fight back against these great power competitors, right? The Russias, the Chinas, the U.S., all of that. They have to sort of pool their talents, their resources, their collective will, and also to fight back, and this is no minor point, he's used the word a fading international rules-based order. So the idea behind this, as you said, this Macron sort of creation, it's like sort of another sort of Frankensteinish creation. Who are all these countries? They're not all even European, right? And yet they do share this one thing in common. They share this sense that at a very fraught time, geopolitically, fraught time in the world, they have something perhaps to offer, and they can collectively do something to sort of counter what they see as the erosion of basic values and the erosion of basic, if you will, democratic ideals, exemplified by the U.S. and the Trump administration. That's why they're all gathering there in Yerevan. You might say, well, this was sort of like Macron's ego. Russia had just invaded Ukraine. He decided he wanted to sort of cobble together a new sort of gathering. Let's call it the European political community. But it actually is interesting. It's 48 countries have been invited to attend this thing, and they really range from Albania to Britain. And in between, you have countries like Georgia and Moldova and Montenegro, all sitting around that table in Yerevan. So perhaps they will bring something to the table that other smaller gatherings can't.
A way in 2022 of keeping Britain in the equation post-Brexit.
Exactly.
Of course, that was very important. But essentially in 2022, this was an anti-Putin front being set up, looking today perhaps like an anti-Trump front. And I'm wondering what those two characters, Putin, Trump, watching this, their people watching this, what their reaction is.
It's interesting. Well, look, Trump is so distracted by his own distractions right now. You have all the developments in Hormuz and Iran. He's probably not paying too much attention to today's gathering of European leaders. And if he even knows that it's happening right now in Yerevan, he probably just thinks it's another sort of ineffective, weak, maybe loser sort of group that can't really do much. So at the end of the day, I don't think he's making much of this. But you're absolutely right, Mark, in the sense that he has sort of filled that giant sort of, raison d'etre, the reason that this group exists, sort of as an anti-Putin alliance originally, in a sense, or how to sort of collectively brainstorm ways to counter Putin's hegemony. And now it's about Trump, right? Because, it's interesting. You had Kaja Kallas, who's the top European policy chief. She basically landed in Yerevan, and right away, she said that the timing of Trump's announcement to draw down, to pull out 5,000 U.S. troops from Germany, says it came as a complete surprise to her. She's sort of registering, and she's perhaps speaking for a lot of people at this group, not just herself, but all the EU members are represented, basically saying that Trump's foreign policy it just seems improvisational. It seems to make no sense. And at times, not everyone says this, but a lot of them are saying at times it seems to work at counter purposes, because whereas Trump seems to bash Europe for not pulling its weight. It doesn't realize that a lot of the reason the U.S. troops are in Europe is to protect American interests, ultimately. It's not just about Europe. It's about America. So they find it ironic that an America First president looking out for America's back would sort of be so quick to withdraw troops that are seen as the spine and the core of America's defense, albeit, yeah, placed on another continent, but a continent closer to what was once America's big adversary, Russia.
Douglas Herbert, our international affairs commentator. Thank you, as always.